2 days after I signed an $80,000 check for my son's wedding, my phone rang. By the time that call ended, I would discover that the woman I had loved for 40 years wanted me dead. "Mr. Carter," the restaurant manager whispered. "Please don't put this on speaker." I frowned. "What's wrong?" There was a long silence. Then he said, "We found something on the VIP security footage. Something you were never supposed to see." My stomach tightened. "You need to come here. Alone." "Why?" "Because your wife is involved." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. "Whatever you do," he continued, "don't tell her I called. If you've ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were hiding a devastating secret from you, stay with me. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and prepare yourself for a revenge story where betrayal goes deeper than anyone could imagine." That morning I had been sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee while my wife Evelyn arranged flowers beside the window. For 40 years I had believed I knew that woman. She had stood beside me when I owned one battered delivery truck. She had watched me work 18-hour days. She had celebrated when that truck became 5, then 50, then 300. Eventually I built a logistics company worth millions, and through every struggle I told myself Evelyn was the one person who had never abandoned me. The previous evening, we had celebrated our son Daniel's wedding to Lauren. I had spent more than most people would spend in a lifetime. I gave the newlyweds $80,000. I handed them the deed to our lake house, a property worth nearly $500,000. I thought I was giving my son a future. I didn't know I was funding the people planning to destroy mine. When I arrived at the Gilded Oak, the manager Victor was waiting. His face looked pale. He didn't shake my hand. He simply locked the security office door behind us. "What you're about to see," he said. "You need to watch until the end." The footage began, 11:45 p.m. The wedding guests had already gone. The ballroom was empty. Then Evelyn appeared. She walked into the VIP lounge carrying champagne, but she wasn't alone for long. Lauren entered behind her. She was still wearing her wedding dress. Barefoot, smiling. Evelyn poured 2 glasses. Lauren raised hers. "To the stupidest man in Atlanta." They laughed. My hands went cold. Then Evelyn lifted her glass. "To Marcus," she said, "the man who thinks he's giving us everything." I stared at the screen. My wife smiled. And for the first time in 40 years, I realized that the woman laughing on that screen was a complete stranger. Then Lauren said something that made my heart stop. "Once he's gone, we can finally take everything." And Evelyn answered calmly, "He won't be around long enough to stop us." I leaned closer to the monitor. I still wasn't ready for what came next. The footage continued. Lauren took a sip of champagne and laughed. "The lake house alone will sell for a fortune." Evelyn nodded. "Everything will be ours." I couldn't breathe. The woman sitting across from Lauren was my wife. The same woman who kissed me goodbye every morning. The same woman who reminded me to take my heart medication. The same woman who prepared my morning smoothies. Then Lauren leaned forward. "What about Daniel?" Evelyn's smile disappeared. "He'll get over it." I felt something inside me crack. Then came the secret that made the rest almost impossible to believe. Lauren admitted that the baby she was carrying wasn't Daniel's. It belonged to another man, a personal trainer named Ryan. I stared at the screen, unable to move. My grandson wasn't my blood. But Evelyn wasn't finished. She leaned toward Lauren and lowered her voice. "Daniel isn't Marcus's son either." My heart seemed to stop. "Then whose is he?" Lauren asked. Evelyn smiled. "Pastor Nathan." I nearly fell out of the chair. Pastor Nathan had been my best friend for more than 30 years. He had baptized Daniel. He had stood beside Evelyn and me during our anniversary celebrations. He had prayed over our family. And according to the woman I married, Daniel was his son. But then Evelyn said the words that destroyed whatever remained of my trust. "Marcus must never find out." Lauren nodded. "What happens if he does?" Evelyn's expression became cold. "He won't." Then she explained why. My medication. The medication I believed was keeping me alive. Evelyn had been crushing digoxin into my morning smoothies. Small amounts. Every day. She wanted it to look like natural heart failure. She wasn't trying to frighten me. She wasn't trying to manipulate me. She was trying to kill me. Slowly, quietly, permanently, Victor stopped the footage. "Mr. Carter." I didn't answer. "Are you okay?" I looked at him. "No." My voice barely came out. "I'm being murdered." Victor immediately reached for his phone. We need to call the police. I shook my head. No. He stared at me. Why? Because if they discover I know, they'll destroy everything. I knew how the system worked. Lawyers, bail, evidence challenges, technicalities. I could spend years fighting them while they portrayed themselves as innocent victims. So I took the flash drive. And I made a decision. I would go home. I would smile. I would drink the smoothie. And I would let them believe their plan was working. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing a betrayed person can do is react too soon. I called my attorney. Grant, open a private file, I told him. What are we calling it? Omega. What's happening? My family is trying to kill me. Silence. Then Grant asked, what do you want me to do? Freeze everything. No notifications? None. And after that? I looked through the windshield at my house, the place where I had spent 40 years building memories. Get me a toxicologist. I paused. And a DNA test. When I walked through my front door, Evelyn smiled. There you are. She held out a glass. My special smoothie. I smiled back. Thank you. She had no idea. I could already smell the bitterness underneath the ginger. I raised the glass and pretended to drink. I didn't swallow the smoothie. I let the liquid touch my tongue, then secretly spat it into a napkin. Evelyn watched me, waiting, so I smiled. Delicious. Her eyes softened. Good, you need your strength. I almost laughed. Strength. She was poisoning me while pretending to protect me. I walked toward the recliner. Then I collapsed. My hand grabbed my chest. I gasped. Evelyn froze. I fell onto the carpet. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then footsteps approached. Slow footsteps. Not panicked, not frightened. Slow. Evelyn kicked me in the ribs. Hard. She was checking whether I was pretending. Then she laughed. It wasn't the laugh of a frightened wife. It was the laugh of someone who believed she had finally won. She called Lauren. The fish has bitten. My blood ran cold. He's on the floor. Lauren arrived with Daniel. Daniel looked terrified. He rushed toward me. Dad. He reached for his phone. Lauren slapped his hand away. Don't. What are you doing? He's supposed to die. Daniel stared at her. But he needs help. If you call now, he might survive. Then she said the words that destroyed the last piece of hope I had for my son. And we'll stay poor. Daniel slowly lowered the phone. I lay motionless. Listening, watching, waiting. Evelyn produced a document. A forged DNR. She told Daniel that I had signed it and didn't want medical intervention. My son looked at me. Then at the phone. Then at the money. And chose silence. That hurt more than the poison. For 32 years I had called Daniel my son. I had paid his tuition. Bought his first car. Helped him start businesses. And now, when he believed I was dying, he was willing to let me go because his wife told him I was worth more dead. So I waited. 15 minutes. Then I coughed. Violently, I pushed myself upright. Everyone screamed. I looked around with a confused expression. What happened? Evelyn rushed toward me. Oh my God. I pretended to be weak. I don't remember. They helped me into the chair. I looked at them and smiled. I had the strangest experience. Nobody spoke. I think almost dying changes a man. I slowly reached for my water. I've decided something. Evelyn swallowed. What? I'm changing my will. Lauren's eyes widened. Daniel leaned forward. What do you mean? I smiled. I'm naming one sole heir. The room went silent. One heir. Those two words changed everything. Because suddenly, Evelyn and Lauren stopped being allies. Each believed the other would be the one receiving my fortune. And within hours, my hidden cameras caught them arguing. You promised me half. You'll get nothing if you keep talking. Daniel stood between them, confused and frightened. I watched from my study. For the first time since the restaurant call, I felt something other than pain. Control. I had bought myself 7 days. 7 days to uncover every lie. 7 days to prepare. 7 days to make sure that when I finally struck, there would be nowhere for them to hide. The next morning, I began collecting evidence. I took hair from Daniel's brush. Then I visited Pastor Nathan. I told him I needed spiritual guidance. He smiled warmly. Of course, Marcus. I watched his eyes. There was no guilt there, only confidence. While he stepped away to get me water, I quietly took his coffee cup. Then I left. The samples went straight to a laboratory run by a doctor I had known for years. 4 hours later, my phone rang. The first result was the poison. The napkin contained a lethal amount of digoxin, enough to kill me. The second result was Dina. Daniel was not my biological son. The probability that Pastor Nathan was his biological father was 99.9%. I sat alone in my car. 32 years. 32 years raising another man's child. But somehow, the truth didn't hurt as much as Daniel's choice in my living room. Blood hadn't made him my son. Love had. And he had chosen money over that love. I called Grant. Activate Omega. He understood immediately. What does that mean? Liquidate everything. He paused. Everything? My company, investments, property, accounts, all of it? All of it. What about your family? I stared through the windshield. I don't have a family. My voice became cold. I have enemies. Then I met Lauren. A hidden microphone was disguised as a tie pin. I offered her $500,000. Leave Daniel, I said. She laughed. You think you can buy me? I think everyone has a price. She leaned toward me. You don't understand. Her smile disappeared. I know about your offshore accounts. My heart tightened. How much? 20 million. She wanted power of attorney. She wanted control. And when I refused, she threatened to accuse me of assault. Everything was recorded. Every word, every threat, every demand. Lauren wasn't simply unfaithful. She was calculating. That afternoon I attended church. Pastor Nathan stood at the pulpit preaching about family and bloodlines. I almost laughed. Afterward I approached him. Daniel looks more like you every day. His face changed. Only for a second. Then he smiled. You notice things. I've had 32 years to notice. He didn't deny it. Instead, he smiled with arrogance. The Spirit leaves marks on people. That was enough. I handed him a $50,000 check. I want every screen in the church working Sunday. He grinned. For your announcement? Yes, he had no idea. He thought I was preparing to give away my fortune. In reality, I was preparing the stage for his destruction. Saturday morning, I froze every account. Lauren's card stopped working. Then Evelyn called. Marcus, something is wrong. I calmly told her there had been suspicious activity connected to Lauren's laptop. The suspicion spread instantly, exactly as I expected. That evening, I heard Daniel speaking to Lauren through a cracked window. They were discussing another dose of poison. After the check cleared, I closed my eyes. Whatever mercy I had left disappeared. Daniel wasn't simply trapped. He was choosing this. He was no longer my confused son. He was part of the plan. And Sunday morning was coming. Sunday morning, the church was packed. 500 people filled the sanctuary. Cameras were streaming everything online. Evelyn sat in the front row, wearing a wide white hat. She looked like the perfect wife. Lauren sat beside Daniel. Pastor Nathan stood beneath the golden lights. Everyone believed they were about to witness my final act of generosity. I walked toward the podium with my cane. I deliberately moved slowly. Weakly, every step was part of the performance. Evelyn smiled. Lauren squeezed her hand. Daniel looked nervous. Pastor Nathan looked excited. I reached the microphone. My friends, I began. A near-death experience changes your understanding of life. Everyone listened. I spent 40 years believing legacy meant leaving something behind for the people you love. I looked at my wife, then my son. Then I discovered that legacy means nothing if the people receiving it never loved you. Silence. I held up my checkbook. Lauren's eyes lit up. Evelyn smiled. Pastor Nathan straightened. Before I sign anything, I said, there is something this congregation needs to see. I turned toward the screens. Play the video. The lights dimmed. The first image appeared. Evelyn, Lauren, champagne. Then Lauren's voice echoed through the church. To the stupidest man in Atlanta. Gasps spread through the congregation. Evelyn's face turned white. I watched her realize what was happening. Then her own voice came through the speakers. To Marcus, the church became completely silent. The footage showed them laughing about my money, the lake house, the estate, the baby. Then came the poison. Evelyn's voice described exactly how she had been crushing medication into my smoothies. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Evelyn stood. "Turn it off." Nobody moved. The video continued. Then came the calf recording. Lauren's threats. her demand for $20 million, her threat to accuse me of assault. The congregation turned against her instantly. But I wasn't finished. The next footage showed Evelyn in my kitchen, grinding pills, pouring them into my smoothie, humming while she did it. I looked directly at her. You told everyone I was sick. I held up the poisoned napkin. This was the sickness. Evelyn collapsed into her chair. Then the final evidence appeared. A dinner report, large enough for everyone to read. Daniel Carter, biological father probability, 99.9% match with Pastor Nathan. Daniel turned toward the pulpit. Is it true? Pastor Nathan didn't answer. Daniel screamed. Is it true? The pastor tried to move toward a side exit, but the doors were already blocked. The final result appeared. The unborn baby wasn't Daniel's either. It belonged to Lauren's trainer, Ryan. Lauren screamed. Daniel dropped to his knees. And for the first time, the entire truth stood in the open. No lies. No secrets. No manipulation. Just consequences. Then I heard sirens outside. I had called the police before the video started. Now they were walking through the doors. My revenge was no longer coming. It had arrived. The police entered the church. Pastor Nathan was arrested first. Then Evelyn. She didn't fight. She simply sat there, staring at the floor. Lauren was different. She screamed. She cursed. She blamed everyone. You can't arrest me. Then she looked at me. You'll regret this. I stared at her calmly. The laboratory has the poison. She froze. The security footage is backed up. Her face drained of color. And your threats were recorded. I leaned closer. You're going to prison. She screamed my name as officers dragged her away. Then only Daniel remained. My son. He was kneeling in the aisle crying. Dad, I stopped. He looked up. Please. His voice broke. I didn't know what to do. I stared at him. You knew enough. I was scared. You were scared of losing money. His eyes filled with tears. I made a mistake. No. I shook my head. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something cruel. You watched me lying on the floor. He lowered his head. You were willing to let me die. I know. He covered his face. I'm sorry. For a moment I wanted to forgive him. He had been my son for 32 years, even if the Dina said otherwise. Then I remembered him lowering the phone. I remembered Lauren telling him not to call. And I remembered him obeying. I reached into my jacket. Daniel looked up. I pulled out my checkbook. His expression changed. Hope. I wrote something. Then tore the check from the book. I let it fall onto the floor. $0. Daniel stared at it. Dad, I sold the company. His face went blank. What? Everything? The warehouses? Sold? The investments? Liquidated? The lake house? Gone. He looked around desperately. Where did it all go? I answered quietly. $25 million. His eyes widened. Where? To the West Side Orphanage. He couldn't speak. You have 24 hours to leave the house. His shoulders collapsed. The cars go back tomorrow. Dad, please. You're 32 years old. I looked at him one last time. You're starting from zero. He cried. I have nothing. I nodded. Neither did I when I started. Then I paused. Maybe losing everything will finally teach you what having everything never could. I turned away. The congregation parted as I walked down the aisle. I could feel hundreds of eyes following me. Some looked shocked. Some looked afraid. Some looked impressed. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about the man I had been before that phone call. A man who believed sacrifice could keep a family together. A man who confused silence with peace. A man who ignored every warning because the truth was too painful to accept. Outside the church, something unexpected was waiting. Not my old work truck. A 1967 Shelby Cobra. Cherry red. Beautiful. Reckless. Free. I had bought it the day before. I threw my cane into the passenger seat. Then I climbed behind the wheel. For the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt alive. I started the engine and drove away. The wind hit my face as I drove. For 40 years, I had measured my life in possessions. Buildings, trucks, bank accounts, property, contracts. But none of those things mattered anymore. I was 70 years old. I had no wife. No empire. No son I could trust. And yet, strangely, I had never felt more free. I finally understood something. My mistake wasn't trusting the wrong people. My mistake was ignoring my instincts because I was afraid of what the truth would cost me. I had spent years telling myself that every family had problems, that every marriage had secrets, that every sacrifice was worth it if it kept everyone together. But silence doesn't create peace. Sometimes silence simply gives betrayal enough time to grow. I thought about Evelyn. 40 years. Gone. I thought about Daniel. 32 years of memories. Gone. But then I remembered something else. The man who had built his company from one rusted truck. The man who had survived bankruptcy threats, failed contracts, dishonest partners, and impossible odds. That man wasn't dead. He had simply been buried beneath years of obligation. And now he was finally free. My phone rang. It was Grant. "Everything is finalized," he said. "The donations? Completed. The accounts? Closed. The evidence? Secured." I smiled. "Good." He hesitated. "Marcus?" "Yes." "You really gave away $25 million? "Yes." "Why?" I looked at the road ahead. "Because I spent 40 years building a fortune for people who didn't love me." I paused. "I'd rather spend the rest of my life knowing that money helped people who actually need it." Grant laughed softly. "What's next?" I looked at the empty road. "I don't know." And for once, that didn't frighten me. Not knowing was freedom. I pulled the Cobra onto an overlook and turned off the engine. The city stretched beneath me. I thought about the restaurant, that dark security room, that terrible video. The moment my entire life had cracked open. At the time, I thought that phone call was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. Now I understood. It was the call that saved me. Because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive gently. Sometimes it kicks down the door. Sometimes it destroys everything you thought you knew. And sometimes, after the destruction, you finally discover who you are. If I could speak to the man I was before that phone call, I would tell him one thing. Don't stay quiet, just to keep people who were never truly yours. Don't sacrifice your peace for someone else's deception. And never ignore the feeling in your gut simply because accepting the truth would hurt. Trust should be built on honesty. Love should be answered with love. And loyalty should never require you to betray yourself. I drove away from that overlook as the sun began to set. I didn't look back. Because some chapters aren't meant to be repaired. They're meant to be closed. And sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't watching your enemies lose everything. It's realizing they no longer have the power to control you. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and tell me in the comments. Would you have exposed them publicly? Or handled the betrayal differently? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Dad's Cold Revenge for more emotional revenge stories where every betrayal has a consequence. Because sometimes, karma doesn't knock. Sometimes, it calls you from a restaurant and tells you to come alone,